Okay. I know you're having a lot of fun. Typically what happens is between 50% and 75% of the groups are essentially playing random strategies even when they get to round 10. I'm hoping, and coming around, I saw several groups start to locate patterns. Okay, they start to notice something happening, and we're going to, in a debrief now, try and tease out what that phenomenon is. Okay, it's an incredibly important phenomenon for business. In an ideal world, what level of output would your partner make? 0. In a perfect world, if you could make their decision for them, do they need to produce something? In an ideal world, what's the most amount of profit you can make?
36.
36. And how do you get 36? Right. So one outcome. Now I'm going to have to move this over here, I'm afraid. Okay? So if you produce 6 and your partner produces 0, your profit is equal to 36. Over 10 rounds, what's the most profit you can make? 360, right? So when I did this exercise, my profit was 360, obviously. What's the problem with this? It's not in the interests of your partner to produce 0. Your partner's not going to say, oh, that's okay, I'll just back out of the market and let me capture the entire market and become, what's this known as? Yeah, this is the monopoly outcome. Okay? Unfortunately, your partner is not going to be willing to back out and give you the monopoly. What may your partner be willing to do? Sorry, I didn't mean to. Your partner may be willing to share the monopoly with you. Okay? How would you share the monopoly? 3 and 3. What's your profit in 3 and 3?
18.
Right, which is half of what it is before. Do we all agree? This is where you'd like to be ideally. But you'd both be reasonably happy. And if you look through some of the decisions that you made during the rounds, it's rare that you would have been able to have made a profit of 18 on any round and without your partner having made a big kind of error. Okay? Put your hand up if at any point in that exercise you had 3-3. Okay, what I'm interested in here are those groups that didn't just have 3-3 as one of their random decisions, but kind of narrowed in on 3 and 3 and profit of 18 as being something that was in their mutual interest. Yeah? Put your hand up if your group realised that it was in your mutual interest to produce 3 each. Excellent. Excellent, okay? Typically, this happens, and this is where it's interesting coming round, because many groups will kind of end up at that point, and the interesting thing is seeing how quickly you get to 3 and 3 and how many rounds you manage to sustain cooperation by choosing 3 and 3. Okay? Often what happens is that partners will say, well, let's just agree that we'll produce 3 and 3. And then they'll try and write in 3 and 3 for the rest of the game. And that's where I have to say, no, you need to make each round and make the decision fresh. You can agree that you're going to do 3. However, I saw it happen with Petra in your group. There was another group round here, I think, that I saw it happen as well. And at the back there, in your final round, it's possible to sustain cooperation for several rounds, both choosing a output level of 3. What's the problem with that? If you've done 3 and 3 3 and 3, 3 and 3, and you have a reasonable expectation that your partner will choose level 3 in the next round, if your partner is choosing 3, are you happy at 3? How much do you want to produce?
6.
Not 6? 4 or 5? Okay? Does everyone see that your best response to an output level of 3 is 4 or 5?
Yes.
Therefore, 3 and 3 is not stable. You can do your best to sustain cooperation and tell each other that you'll choose an output level of 3, but it's not stable because it's not consistent with your best response to what your opponent's doing. This is why it's crucial that there's 10 rounds. Because if I said this is an indefinite game, it will be easier to do 3 and 3, 3 and 3, 3 and 3. But as soon as you reach this round 10, what are you going to do? Petra, what did you do in round 10? What did you choose?
I choose again 3.
What was your partner then? I think you're lying now because you want to come across as being nice. Who was it?
It's because of round 8 when she changed the numbers.
Oh, sorry, it was round 8. Okay, the one that I watched was round 8.
Yeah.
So they've been doing 3 and 3, 3 and 3, 3 and 3, and then when I watched to see what they did next, Petra shifted from 3 to 4. Okay? And if you've got this final round at round 10, you would expect on round 10 you to stab your opponent in the back. But if you expect that to happen in round 10, what would you do in round 9? Stab them first. But if they're going to do that in round 9, what would you do in round 8? Right? So the whole point of this game is to see how long can you sustain cooperation when you have an incentive eventually to stab your opponent in the back. And if you are a group of people who are very suspicious of each other, you may never be able to have a shared monopoly. Because you're immediately anticipating being stabbed in the back. Okay? What we have here, this is called a corno competition. Okay, corno, it doesn't matter, it's just named after some French guy. What's another word for the output choice of 4 and 4? And is it Valentina? Nina. What's another word for 4 and 4? At that point. You used the word beginning with E. Equilibrium. Okay? The purpose of this game was to notice this payoff table is very big and complicated. All of these numbers beyond kind of producing 6, you've got lots of negative numbers here. So most of you realise very quickly it's not worth having output this high. So you can kind of delete most of this, right? But in actual fact, this game gets played in an incredibly small choice between 3 and 4. Okay? The heart of this game is you both want to have 18. This is the most amount of profit you can reasonably expect, but it relies on cooperation. And both parties have an incentive to stab their opponent in the back, in which case whoever successfully does that will get 20, which is the incentive to do so. But if you both try and stab each other in the back, you have 16. Okay? Did any group have 4 and 4 at any point? Okay? And hopefully what you saw there is that 4 and 4 is an equilibrium. Everything in this game merges towards 4 and 4. Once you have 4 and 4, there is no way for you both to increase your profit. You get stuck there. And you can try and convince each other that we'll do 3 and 3. But you just constantly have this battle about cooperation or competition between whether you produce 3 or whether you produce 4. Okay, It's a very simple exercise to understand the difficulty of cooperating, right? So if you're worried about cartels, if you cannot sustain cooperation when there's just two people sat next to each other in a fake game, then how are cartels supposed to operate? Right? In a cartel, you constantly have the incentive to renege on a deal. Everyone agrees that it's better to cooperate. Right? It's always better for two firms to cooperate with each other at the expense of the customer. What we're looking at is in the real world how easy it is to be able to do that when you have an incentive to defect. Now I want to tweak the rules of the game slightly to try and look at a different concept. If you didn't, as a partnership, if you weren't able to locate something interesting about 3 and 3 and 4 and 4, I'm going to give you another opportunity to see the logic behind this game. I'm going to change the rules and I'm going to be observing very closely to see who the first person in this room is to work out how the change in rules affects the way you play the game. And here it is. I want you to do 2 additional rounds. We haven't got more copies of the paper, so just kind of, if you can just continue the table and have like a round 11 and a round 12 or on a different piece of paper. But on this occasion, okay, can everyone hear me? On this occasion, for round 11 and round 12, you do not need to make a simultaneous decision. One of you is able to write in their output choice, and if you want to, show it to your opponent before they've written theirs. Similarly, if you want to wait for your opponent to make their choice first, you can try and do so. You do not need to simultaneously reveal your output choice. That make sense? So round 11 and 12, I'm cancelling the rule about simultaneous reveal. How should that affect the game? The question is, what is that level of output? How much output should you choose to maximise your output in a way that's consistent with the choice of your opponent? If what you're saying to me is, if I choose anything less than 6 and my partner chooses less, that's not an equilibrium because it's too vague. Right? There is a point at which, in the same way that when we did the Corno version, we ended up at 4 and 4, and that was a stable equilibrium, and there was no incentive to move away from there. And what we're trying to do now is to see who can be the first person to see where this game ends up. At which point, no one's going to move from any other output. There is one output combination, and only one, that is in equilibrium. In the second game. It's not 3 and 3, because 3 and 3 is unstable. If your opponent does 3, what would you do? If your opponent does 4, you would do 4 and you'd get 16.
5, 6.
But there's a way in which you can make more profit.
It's 5, 6.
You can get more than 16. Whereabouts? So you're getting 6.
No, it's 5, 6. 5, 6.
If we choose 6.
If I choose,
Okay, guys, listen up. We may be on the verge of a breakthrough discovery. Repeat what you just said.
if I choose 6,
If you choose 6, then what? If you choose 6, guys, if you choose 6, what will your partner choose? If you choose 6, what will your partner choose? 3. Can your partner do any better than 3?
no.
No. How much profit do you make if you choose 6 and your partner chooses 3? 18. That's the equilibrium. If you choose 6, your partner's best response is 3, and that gives you profit of 18. Your partner will not be able to increase their profit in any other way. They will be forced to have output equal to 3, and that will give you profit of 18. Does that make sense? What's the trick? You need to know that, right? But why is it easier said than done?
Yeah, because he,
How do you force your opponent to make the response to your offer? How?
yeah, because he has to do the. You basically.
What's the secret to this game?
You basically like put him in the cage.
How do you put them in a cage?
Choosing 6.
By choosing 6. The trick of the game is what?
So you clinch it to that corner.
That you do what first?
You choose the 6.
Okay, you need to figure it out first, but then what do you need to do? Act
Do it. Be
first.
the first.
This is first mover advantage. First mover advantage. In this game, it took us a while. In this game, right? Now that you can make a sequential decision, whoever goes first can guarantee more profit than in the previous game. Right? So the trick here is to make your decision before your opponent. Some of you, I was coming around and some of you said, okay, it's your turn to go first. Right? In business, is this what you do? Right? You say to your competitor, right, we've just had a really big year, made loads of profit, now it's your turn to go. Right? So this is first mover advantage. So the whole point of this game, and I saw a couple of you get onto this, the whole point of this game is that as soon as I say start, it's a race for the first person to write 6. Each round, sorry? Why didn't I tell you before? Yeah, but we got there though, right? We got there. We got there as a group. So this is what's known as Stackelberg competition. So if you choose 6, whoever goes first, and again, it's up to you who goes first. All you need to do is to write 6 before your opponent. You just need to act quickest. If you do 6, your opponent is forced to do 3, and your profit is going to be equal to 18. And what's your partner's profit? 9. Okay. What does that equal? What does this equal? Oh yeah, I thought it was something more interesting than that. Okay, but what it means is that you can get back to, this is the most amount of fees and profit you can make, the cooperative solution, okay, which is more than the equilibrium when you do it simultaneously. Okay, this is a very valid point. Right, so far I've said this is a stable equilibrium. I'm making an assumption. Remember though, what's the objective of this exercise? Make profit. Okay? So it's your opponent's best response to go for 3 because 9 is more than any other number. Right? We're saying that your opponent, if you choose 6, your opponent is going to do 3 because they can't do any more profit than 3. You are quite right to point out that in the real world, you may think, okay, profit of 9 is better than profit of 0, but I'm willing to engage in a loss to harm my opponent. That's fine. So you could say, I'm willing to pay money to harm my opponent. And maybe it could go to 6-6. If you are willing to pay money to harm your opponent. That's fine. That's true. Okay?
Why would we choose 7?
Well, because you would earn 14.
Okay, so if 7 and your opponent is 2 or 3,
Okay. Choose the last one.
you get 4. Your profit is 14 as opposed to 18. Okay. So if you want to look into this in more detail, you've got the kind of equation stuff. The numbers are, the numbers aren't just made up. But what they're trying to do is to get you to understand the difficulty of sustaining cooperation. This is an extension of game theory because what we have here is what's technically known as a Nash equilibrium. And has anyone heard the concept of prisoner's dilemma? This here is a sub-game prisoner's dilemma. What it means is you both want to be here. This makes you both better off. But the logic of the game is pushing you here. Right? The profit motive is pushing you here, even though you would both be better if you cooperate. In the real world, you may try and find ways in which you can write a contract to say, I will only do 3. Okay? The problem with that in the real world is that's illegal. You can't agree to restrict output in the real world. That's where antitrust and monopoly law. Okay? But also what we're seeing is, even though there's that incentive to try and cooperate, there's a very strong incentive to renege on that deal. And that's why it's very difficult in the real world to have collusion and to have cartels. In the real world, are you making a decision about how much output to produce relative to your competitors? What are you really making a decision about in the real world?
Price.
Price, okay? So to make this slightly more realistic, we're going to change the game so that instead of your choice being about how much output to produce, your choice is what price to charge. Okay? You can use your original payoff table or write a new one. We probably don't need to do 10 rounds of this before you see the point, but I do want you to go back to doing this simultaneously. So you need to make your decision about what price to set, and your opponent has to do that. You cover it up, and then on the count of 3, show it to each other. It needs to be a simultaneous decision again. You're making a decision about the price to charge, and your opponent is also making a decision about their price. And the way that they relate to each other is that we're assuming that these goods are very close substitutes. Okay? So price is going to be very important. As an example, if you look at, imagine that you set a price of £2, or €2, or whatever we're using. Okay? So you choose a price of 2. If your opponent sets a price that's higher than 2, in other words, if you manage to undercut your opponent, what's your profit? 20. Okay? If your partner happens to choose the... Make this consistent, sorry. If your partner happens to choose the same price as you, what's your profit?
10.
20.
Right? So no. If you undercut your partner, you get the whole market. If you have the same price, you share the market. Right? Your profit is half the amount that it would be. So also, if your price is higher than your opponent, what's your profit? Minus 0.1. Okay? So this is essentially 0, but this reflects some very small kind of transaction costs. Okay? But what we're essentially saying is that if you undercut your rival, you get the whole market. If you charge the same price, you share the market. And if you are priced higher than your opponent, you make nothing at all. Okay? So that's the payoff table. I want you to do as many rounds as you think it takes for you to see the logic of this game. Again, you can try and cooperate. You can try and share your monopoly. You can try and reach an agreement about what prices to charge, but you need to do this simultaneously. Okay, let's just finish this up now. If you wanted to try and share the monopoly, what price would you charge? 6, what do you want your opponent to charge? What's your profit? Can everyone see? So this is identical here. Here your output was 3, and you had a profit of 18 each. If you're able to set the same price as each other, if you engage in a price fixing cartel, and you both charge £6, €6, whatever, then your profit will be 18. Are you both happy with that outcome? Can you realistically do any better?
Yeah.
How can you realistically do better? If you just look at it overall, does it look good? Does it look like the type of place you'd like to be? What's the problem? It's not incentive compatible. It's not stable. Reason it's not stable is if your opponent is having a price of 6, yes, you can charge 6 and get 18, but what's the temptation?
5.
If you cut your price to 5, what happens? Your profit goes from 18 to 35. And guess what? When we do the experiment and when we look at more realistic ones in the real world, this is a very big incentive to renege on your deal. Okay, so now you're going to do 5. If your opponent's doing 5, you both get 17.5. Is this incentive compatible? No, because if you know your opponent's charging 5, what do you charge? 4. Right? But if you know that your opponent's charging 4, what do you charge? 3. But if you're both charging 3 and you know that your opponent's going to charge 3, what do you charge? So where do we end up? 1. This is called Bertrand's competition. You don't really need to know all of these terminologies, but I think it's useful. How many of you ended up at charging 1 each? 1 and 1. You should have felt when you were playing this game, your body and your mind is telling you that you want to be at 6 and 6. Right? And you're saying that to each other. 6 and 6 is where you want to be. But there is a force within the game that is gravitating you towards 1 and 1. And provided your goal is profit, then you cannot escape that force. You will end up at 1 and 1. Okay? Now this is a far more extreme version than what we saw here. Here we saw the force of competition, and this is where consumers are made better off, because competition here is busting the cartel. You guys are trying to cooperate, but it's the forces of competition that mean you end up here. Doesn't make much difference in the end, your profit is still very high. In the case of price competition, we see a far bigger role for competition. Right? When it's just making an output choice, it doesn't make a massive difference. But here, when we're looking at a price choice, we see this massive, the market almost entirely collapses, prices collapse. And you do see examples of this sort of thing happening in the real world. The take home from this is that if you're a firm, it's very bad to get into a price war with a company that's selling a similar product to yours. Okay? Because you will move from up here somewhere all the way down here. This is why you see firms saying, your company may do this, you may say that we will not be beaten on price. Why would you make that guarantee? It's not because you are producing it, it's not because it's impossible to sell it for any less. You're still going to be making a profit. Why do you say we won't be beaten on price? Because it will not be in your interest of your competitor to launch a price war against you. Right? It's a signal to your competitor. What you're doing is you're saying, maybe you're charging 6, okay, and you're making loads of profit. But if you say, we will not be beaten on price, your competitor will know that they should not come in and start a price war, because if they do, your competitor and you will end up at 1. You are saying, you're credibly committing to your competition, we are willing to throw away this market, essentially. Right? We will drive prices right down to the bottom. We don't want to, but that's what will happen. So it's no interest to you to come in and to cause a price war. Right? Does anyone realise the promise that you will not be beaten on price is not a signal that prices can't get any lower. It's a signal that you are willing to sacrifice the entire market to prevent firms coming in and undercutting you. So in the real world, how do firms avoid it? Apart from having a credible threat to engage in a price war, how else do firms avoid these problems?
But they're not offering just products for price, they add some additional services.
Okay, so this is where product differentiation comes in. This is on the assumption that these two products are identical. So if you can find a way of making your product different from your competitors, then this force becomes far weaker. Okay? So this is where the marketing people come in, because they need to kind of brand it in a different way, or make it, or your innovation guys to actually change the product itself. But what you want to make sure is that your customers don't treat your product as something that's identical to a rival, because that's where the price will happen. Okay? There's other things that we can go into in more detail, but you'll probably pick up on that in a marketing class. Okay, any questions about the exercise that we've just done. The fact that I'm not giving you a very deep PowerPoint presentation where I give you lots of terminology and lots of theory isn't because the theoretical stuff doesn't matter. It's just that I think it's more effective to learn it by doing these examples. But you should still have that theoretical background. In the course outline, I recommended a micro textbook and I recommended a macroeconomics textbook. And I do encourage you, I've chosen both of them because they're very easy to read. They're not highly expensive and dull. They are reasonably cheap and they're reasonably entertaining to read and they're full of practical examples as well. But I do encourage you, especially in the micro section of the course, to make sure you read the textbook. And what we're doing in class is we're seeing the application of these ideas. You also still need to do the boring stuff, which is to like read the kind of definitions and all of that, those things. Tomorrow we will do a little bit more in terms of theory and PowerPoint and me explaining to you different concepts and stuff. The micro, though, I find it a lot better to use class time to do applications and to do some more practical exercises. Okay, but there is a textbook in the outline. I do want you to make sure you're aware of that.